Hello, welcome back to our channel. You might be thinking, Zoe, why did you say our? It's because we have dissociative identity disorder, DID. We've covered that in a previous video. It used to be called multiple personality disorder, but that's what's going on with that. So the other disorder that we'll be talking about is called borderline personality disorder. In the UK, it would be called emotionally unstable personality disorder, which I think is probably a more accurate label of what it actually is. But ignoring the fact that borderline is a terrible name for the disorder, what we want to do is we want to look clinically at how it's described, how it's defined, and we'll read that really quickly so that we can just get a clinical opinion. After that, we'll explain some of our experiences with it and what it means to us. And then after that, we'll talk about how it kind of impacts other communities, and specifically the trans community, because there are a lot of trans people that have BPD. And while it's definitely not an exclusive thing, there's plenty of cis people that have BPD. It is something that affects the trans community as well. And so we want to make sure that we cover that. So let's move into defining borderline personality disorder. So we're going back to Very Well Mind again, a very good site for mental health topics and for resources. So what is borderline personality disorder? Borderline personality disorder is a serious psychological condition that's characterized by unstable moods, emotions, relationships, and behavior. So this right here really is so much of what it is, like what's causing it and that sort of thing. So unstable moods and emotions, when they say that somebody's wearing their heart on their sleeves, like what their emotional state is, like you can just look at them and see it because they're expressive. That, in a sense, would be the very mild way of presenting with something like borderline. We experience emotions in the extreme. For us, a lot of times when we first feel an emotion, we'll feel it to the extreme, and then slowly it'll come back down within a regular range of an emotion. So if it's happy, then we're joyous. If we're mad, we might be we might even feel like rage, and then slowly it'll come down to us just being like angry or whatever else. If you've watched a lot of our other videos, especially if it's content that like aggravates us a lot, you might notice that sometimes we are pretty explosive in expressing our anger about something, and then we'll tone it back down and then discuss it in a, we'll say, more reasonable way. That's kind of how we experience this for us. It's one of several personality disorders recognized by the American Psychiatric Association. Personality disorders are psychological conditions that begin in adolescence or early adulthood, continue over many years, and when left untreated, can cause a great deal of distress. Thankfully, the right treatments targeted for BPD can help significantly. And in the treatment for BPD, they're talking about dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. If you are somebody that has borderline personality disorder, we would strongly recommend you, if possible, to get counseling and try to get into a DBT therapy. So let's look at, they got symptoms. Okay. So in order to be diagnosed with BPD, the individual must experience 5 or more of the following symptoms in a variety of contexts. So efforts to avoid abandonment. Abandonment and rejection is something that anybody with borderline personality disorder feels deathly afraid of. It is something that that bothers us quite a bit. It's something that frightens us, and possibly due to things that happened to us in our childhood, like the death of a caregiver, like very early on, or not having a stable home environment, or not having like parents who were there or that listened to you, like maybe they neglected you. That will have instilled a fear of abandonment that will follow us for the rest of our lives. So anytime that we face rejection, or we think that somebody's going to abandon us, like a friend or family member, or we even perceive that that might happen, it causes us a lot of distress, and we might want reassurances that they're going to stay, that they aren't going to leave us, and that we didn't do something that has like pushed them away. So we might constantly ask them, how are they feeling? Are they okay? Is there anything that we can do to make them happier? Emotional instability. We can have rapid, extreme mood swings that are fairly quick compared to the average person. So for us, we might go from at the beginning of the day to feeling like hopeful and happy, and then by the afternoon, something might have happened, and now we're feeling like very depressed, and that might lead us to then feel very angry for a little while, and then by the end of the night, something happened that improved our day, and we feel really happy again. So it's possible to experience a wide variety of mood swings, and for it to happen very rapidly, so that the people around you feel like you are on an emotional roller coaster and you're dragging them along with you. Now, this, I want to specify, it doesn't always present itself like this, and obviously like all of these symptoms are on a spectrum. So some of them might be mild and some of them might be more severe, and they might happen with more or less frequency depending on the person. I'm not a clinician. I'm only reading this and then describing our experiences with this. So take this for what it is, our experiences and what we're describing. We're not saying necessarily that if you have BPD, this is how you experience it, nor should you base the expectations of other people's BPD on our experiences, because we also do have a dissociative disorder. So for us, when we feel the things like this, when we feel extremes in emotions, like they pitch up or they pitch down really hard, a lot of times we'll just dissociate and separate ourselves from the body until we calm down, or another alter steps forward and begins fronting. So essentially, someone else takes over for us, and the alter who is feeling extremely like triggered or very emotional will get some time out while someone else takes over. For us, that has our system has handled that very well, and a lot of people are surprised when they find out that we have BPD traits. But every now and then we do have episodes, and we manifest some pretty extreme emotions very quickly. Feelings of emptiness. This one is very difficult for us, and it's definitely been a problem for going on for a long time. But feelings of emptiness can be like, essentially, if you've ever felt like life is meaningless, or you have no purpose, there's nothing that will give you fulfillment, you don't desire anything, you don't feel like there's anything worth working toward. It feels like you're a husk of a person, and all the meaning and purpose that you've had in life has been drained away from you, where you feel like you're a void, and that everything that you're doing to try and fill it, to find stimulation, and that might be, drinking, partying, doing wild behaviors, like especially like one of the other ones listed, impulsive behaviors that can put you in dangerous situations. Sometimes borderliners will do that to try and fill that feeling of emptiness, and that the emptiness can end up manifesting in numbness, and it can manifest in ways that to us sometimes feel similar to how DPDR feels, and you end up feeling like that you might engage in I don't want to say that. You'll do things to your body to try and make yourself feel something, and that's why emptiness is one of the most alarming traits that most people experience that have BPD. And if you do struggle with that, and you have BPD, you're not alone. And I understand it's a difficult thing to deal with, but you're a worthwhile person. Identity disturbances. Oh no, come on. Who would have thought that someone like myself would have identity disturbances? Impulsive behavior, we covered that one. Oh, identity disturbances. All right, so I will talk about it for a second. When they say identity disturbances, and this is something that like I know a lot of trans people end up being targeted with, because a lot of people that try to weaponize our mental health against us, especially like just weaponizing it against trans people, they'll say, oh, how do you know that you're actually trans? You have BPD. How do you know that it's not just an identity disturbance or that sort of thing? Identity disturbance in this sense is not like a persistent psychological construct of an understanding of oneself that continues and is durable. That's what a trans identity is, just like a cis identity. It's durable, and it is lasting, and it's a psychological construct of an understanding of yourself. Cis people also have BPD. And when cis people have identity disturbances, so they end up being unsure about like who they are and what they like, and what things they're interested in, they might adapt other people's identities in order to fit in a way that kind of mirrors those other people. So all of a sudden it's like, they might adopt, like, say one of their friends, say we have a cis guy and he's like in his late teens or something, and he has friends that enjoy playing football, but he doesn't care about football at all. He might all of a sudden convince himself that he really likes football and start becoming really into it and doing a lot of research, reading, and start like learning about it and learning what his friends like. And then all of a sudden, everything that they like, he likes. And he's just cloning whatever they desire in himself and then mirroring that back at them, because he's lost a sense of his own identity. It's no longer strong enough for him to maintain that sense of the things that he likes. The disturbance is temporary and doesn't necessarily last all that long. But this behavior can make a lot of people feel that some borderliners they might call us like two-faced or something, where it's like, oh, well, we know that you said that you don't like football. Why are you all of a sudden telling these people that you like football? And it's that they don't realize, and even the borderliner might not recognize that in the moment of what they're doing, not, unless they're very self-aware. But yeah, they're cloning stuff, and it's not just one person they'll do this with. They might pull portions of all their other friends' identities and make themselves an amalgamation of all of their other friends' interests. And the thing is, that's not the same as being transgender. Being trans, again, is a durable psychological construct that is a firm identity, and is when I say it's durable, I mean that it stands up to skepticism. It stands up to, this person will continuously go back to that identity, even if they are struggling with some type of disturbance. They're going to reset back to being trans, just like a cis person resets to being cis. Even though they might have some identity disturbances, that's not going to lead them to be suddenly trans, and it's not going to lead a trans person to suddenly be a cis person. It's not how this works. But a lot of people that want to attack trans communities will focus on this specific area of BPD, which very often is one of the, I don't want to say, and none of these traits are minor things. They're all important in their own ways, but of the traits of BPD that are expressed, we would say that the identity disturbance is one of the lesser concerning ones, because the impulsive behavior, I mean, that's like reckless driving, binge drinking, impulsive gambling. Like, there's a bunch of impulsive things that people can do. They can also be binging on food, right? So that you can binge or you can purge. And those behaviors are definitely not healthy, and we should not engage in those, but some of us do, unfortunately. Inappropriate, intense anger. This one, so we've mentioned before that part of our counseling that we had was for anger specifically. because we did feel a lot of anger and a lot of rage just at a world that we felt was callous, was cruel, and just did not care in the ways that it harms people. We're very passionate, obviously, about social justice issues, and just the history and just the time and time and time repeated over and over of injustices, the oppression of minority communities really would make us angry, so that a lot of times we would just have this background toxic anger following us around. We now recognize that we should take that anger and turn that into motivation to make positive changes in the world and advocate for those changes. And that's one of the reasons why we argue and fight so passionately for social justice. You can take anger and turn it into something healthy and productive, but a lot of times, especially with borderliners, our anger can overwhelm us, and we can, some of us might do some harmful things. We once destroyed our cell phone in a bout of rage, and that cost us like $1,000. So it's not something that, like, if we could go back and make the decision again, we would not have done that. But at the time, we were unstable and we were in a rage, and that led to us doing that. Sorry, I'm trying not to dissociate and stay with it. Unstable interpersonal relationships. This one is also a pain because it's at the core of what BPD is, right? It's this, if we were by ourselves and we were working somewhere, no one would have, if they were talking to us and looking for our borderline traits, nothing would manifest. We'd be by ourselves working. We would seem like we were perfectly fine. And for the most part, and this unfortunately leads to some people that have BPD deciding that they would be better off kind of like self-isolating and not necessarily having the same types of relationships that other people do. It's because a lot of our traits, what triggers a lot of this instability within us, is when we feel insecure about something within a relationship. And that's why, well, a lot of people that borderliners barely know might interact with us and be like, well, they're completely normal. Why are you, like, I don't know why people are even saying like this is a thing. But people that do know us definitely will be aware that we are an emotionally intense person, and that we're passionate. We can love deeper than anybody else, but at the same time, if we become unstable, if we're not getting therapy, if we've never gone to counseling, we unfortunately can manifest some negative behaviors. Just like anyone else, everyone can do bad things. Everyone can manifest every single thing on this list. Someone that does not have BPD could feel that, could experience that, and could engage in some type of what they usually think of with us is manipulative, because we were trying to manipulate people into staying with us or doing things for us, whatever else. Although that's not something that we engage in. That is something that some borderliners do, but so do people that don't have any other type of mental illness. And this is something that like bothers us quite a lot, is mental illness is often labeled, it's treated as if it's responsible for every single negative human behavior. And that's just not true. You don't have to be diagnosed with something. You don't have to be mentally ill to be a scumbag or to be a bad person. And just like on the flip side, having a mental illness, I know a lot of people like to beat up with narcissistic personality disorder. Having NPD does not necessarily make somebody inherently a bad person. Just like psychopathy, somebody could be a psychopath but not be a bad person, and that is a different conversation to have. So suicidal or self-harming behaviors, that one is it's self-evident what it means. I don't want to discuss that. It's too personal for us, and it's going to be very hard for us to talk about it without possibly hurting other people in the audience. Everyone's aware of what that is. Transient paranoid or dissociative symptoms. We are very aware of what dissociative symptoms are, and I think everybody that is watching this now is familiar with our dissociative symptoms. Transient paranoia, the paranoia can, in more extreme forms, manifest in psychotic episodes. It can also cause hallucinations or delusional thinking. We might think that like somebody intends to harm us when they don't, that sort of thing. As you can see, when they said it's a serious disorder, they were not exaggerating. It is a serious disorder, but it can be managed with DBT, and things can get better for you. For us, some of the more harmful things that we saw when we were first researching, like, they're talking BPD, and we're like, well, what is this thing? There were certain things where we read certain misinformation where they said that, especially because some of this information before the 90s, and I want to say like really early 2000s, there was not a lot of research done into BPD. And within a lot of mental health areas, having BPD was treated with a lot of stigma. It was, for a lot of people, it was considered like a death sentence of sorts for personality disorders, because it seemed like it was resistant to so many therapies. There was no effective way to treat it. There's no medications that treat it very effectively either. There are some medications that might be used to treat certain symptoms or to help you with certain aspects of it. But personality disorders, generally speaking, are not really treated with medication. The medication can help with some symptoms, but it's not going to make it go away. And personality disorders are something that you just have to learn to live with for the rest of your life. Similar to dissociative disorder that we have. Dissociative disorders, you just learn to live with it. You can, on the lesser end of the spectrum, like DPDR, and to some extent dissociative amnesia, you can learn to treat it well enough that it manifests very minimally, or you might be able to overcome some of the symptoms entirely. For the more severe disorders, it's something that we just have to live with going forward. And that's the same with our borderline traits. So one of the largest pieces of misinformation that we had heard is that it was not treatable and that you're essentially out of luck if you get the diagnosis. That's not true. Or delusional thinking. We might think that like somebody intends to harm us when they don't, that sort of thing. As you can see, when they said it's a serious disorder, they were not exaggerating. It is a serious disorder, but it can be managed with DBT, and things can get better for you. For us, some of the more harmful things that we saw when we were first researching, like, they're talking BPD, and we're like, well, what is this thing? There were certain things where we read certain misinformation where they said that, especially because some of this information before the 90s, and I want to say like really early 2000s, there was not a lot of research done into BPD. And within a lot of mental health areas, having BPD was treated with a lot of stigma. It was, for a lot of people, it was considered like a death sentence of sorts for personality disorders, because it seemed like it was resistant to so many therapies. There was no effective way to treat it. There's no medications that treat it very effectively either. There are some medications that might be used to treat certain symptoms or to help you with certain aspects of it. But personality disorders, generally speaking, are not really treated with medication. The medication can help with some symptoms, but it's not going to make it go away. And personality disorders are something that you just have to learn to live with for the rest of your life. Similar to dissociative disorder that we have. Dissociative disorders, you just learn to live with it. You can, on the lesser end of the spectrum, like DPDR, and to some extent dissociative amnesia, you can learn to treat it well enough that it manifests very minimally, or you might be able to overcome some of the symptoms entirely. For the more severe disorders, it's something that we just have to live with going forward. And that's the same with our borderline traits. So one of the largest pieces of misinformation that we had heard is that it was not treatable and that you're essentially out of luck if you get the diagnosis. That's not true. It is treatable. One of the other things that we had read and people had repeated, and this is not true, if you have a BPD, it's not true. And that was, there was some people that had said that borderliners were incapable of loving someone or experiencing love, and that all BPD love is some type of manipulation, and it's just a tool that we use to keep people around us because we can't stand to be alone, and we are inherently abusers or abusive in some type of way to everyone that we interact with, essentially. And we self-deceive into thinking that we can love people, but that's not something that we actually can experience in a healthy way. That hurt us so much when we first came across it, and we immediately started deconstructing all of our ideas, all of our relationships. Like that can't be true because we feel so much passion and so much love for a lot of the people in our lives, and to see that in, like, you know, some areas responding to clinicians of some people saying stuff like that was very difficult to read. And it's something that, even though we've learned since then that it's not true, that nobody in clinical fields says that or thinks that that is like legitimate. At one point in time, we could see like why some people would think that. And if you are a borderliner, you deserve to be loved, and you can love other people just fine. And it's not a manipulation thing. Do not let people gaslight you into weaponizing your mental health in ways like that to self-deceive and to lie to you. Especially knowing that the disorder is so heavily based on relationships and how we feel toward other people and how much we want them not to leave us or abandon us, to then turn around and say that our understanding of like love itself is fake is incredibly cruel to do. So just be aware that if somebody says that to you, they are lying, they are gaslighting you. It's not true. You deserve love and you are fully capable. In fact, I think borderliners can love people more intensely than almost anyone else. So you have a lot to offer somebody, and you have a lot of love to give, and that it's not, the disorder is not necessarily all doom and gloom, because there are parts of experiencing borderline feelings that are so intense that other people will never know what it feels like to be that passionate about something, to love somebody that much. And it is life is worthwhile, and things can get better for you. In the same ways that BPD gets weaponized, to say the stigma surrounding it is weaponized against people that have it. We're accused of being manipulators, abusers, sometimes like physically dangerous, or unstable, or crazy or insane. Now, despite the fact that I don't know, I might meet the definition of insane. Besides that, the thing is that a lot of more conservative areas online that are impossibly cruel and that oppose social justice and want to oppress minority groups, because they are aware that there are a lot of trans people who also suffer with BPD, they will weaponize that illness if they are aware that you have it and try to use that in a way to attack you. I would highly suggest that if anybody engages in these tactics with you, that you should just immediately mute them or block them. You don't owe them an explanation about your disorder. They know nothing about you. Every disorder manifests differently in different people at to different severity. And you also deserve forgiveness as well. And before you were ever, say, diagnosed, before you were aware that you had BPD, a lot of us experienced times in our lives where we were unstable, where we didn't understand why we did the things that we did, why we felt the way that we did. But a lot of us also come from a traumatic history. And you're not expected to be some bastion of perfect rationality and perfect emotional reactions. No one is. And people that don't have BPD sometimes also lose their temper or say things that they didn't mean, or desperately, feel the need for some type of validation. It's not something that's unique to people that have BPD. Don't let them lie to you. Don't let them gaslight you. You should not tolerate people, and this is the boundaries thing, right? And for a lot of borderliners, boundaries are very important for us. Not only do firm boundaries help protect people around us if we are having an episode, so that they know, like, hey, we have an agreement, we have this boundary, you should not push past that boundary. Not only does that help them, but it helps us as well. Because what a lot of people don't talk about is that a lot of borderliners are abused in relationships, because a lot of times if we end up becoming convinced that our partner is wonderful, we can take that to the extreme. And there is a concept within BPD called splitting. And it's not the same as DID. And DID, when we talk about splitting, we're talking about splitting alters. In BPD, when we're talking about splitting, we're talking about dichotomous thinking or black and white thinking. Now, a lot of other disorders can manifest black and white thinking. A lot of other disorders also manifest a lot of these traits as well. And that's why it's important that not only do you hear this and think, oh, I certainly have BPD just based on these traits, but you also go and seek counseling if this resonates with you, because you could also have bipolar disorder or some other disorder that is not BPD. And if you have bipolar, that is treated with medication. So you would need to go talk to a therapist, because like that could greatly improve your life. If you are undiagnosed bipolar, the medication will help you. Sorry, I just totally, okay. Yeah, I blanked. So when we're talking about dichotomous thinking, black and white thinking, it manifests in other disorders like ADHD, autism can also have black and white thinking. But in BPD, when we experience black and white thinking, it's most often in the form of splitting. And when we split, you think of somebody as all good, and that's like splitting white on them, or all bad, and that's splitting black on them. Think about like yin yang type of thing, where it's like you're all good or all bad. And it can be like when it's a split, it's like an instant thing where they go from being, an average person, to like all of a sudden they're an angel, and you would do anything for them. That type of relationship can end up leading to a situation where the borderliner is abused for an extended period of time, and we stay in relationships way longer than other people would because of that thinking. We tolerate way more things than people would. And as most mental health situations, people that have BPD are more often abused than we are the abusers. But people only want to focus on the borderliners who are abusive, in which case you could say like splitting black on somebody could lead to a situation where it's like you just slam the door on them. Like you're just like, they're all bad. You're devaluing them. You're like, I don't like them. they do nothing but harm me. I can't stand them. I don't want to be around them. And if it's a family member, then all of a sudden you can go from having good familial relationships with them to just cutting them off entirely. Or, you might be dating somebody, then all of a sudden you split block on them. And not only do you break up with them, but you block them on all your social media and you go through and delete or erase all history of that relationship, throw out all of your pictures, and just pretend that it never happened. So obviously, there is a lot to BPD. I covered just extemporaneously off the top of my head as far as like, we covered what the symptoms are, covered how this has impacted us in our lives, and then also talked about how it's weaponized and the stigma around it is weaponized, not only to attack individuals, but also to attack communities as well. That people that have borderline are worthwhile. You deserve love. You deserve forgiveness. You deserve patience and understanding. And I cannot stress enough that if you feel like you have borderline or you struggle with these issues, that you should seek counseling. You should reach out for help. You do not have to suffer alone, and that there is hope that you can improve yourself and you can live a better, more fulfilling life. And we can try to address some of these things, like especially that chronic emptiness, and stop you from engaging in more dangerous behavior. I would highly recommend another YouTube channel. There's a guy, he's a clinical psychologist. He's been specializing in BPD for like 20 years. His name is Dr. Daniel Fox. I will put a link to his channel in the description below. He has been an amazing resource whenever we were not in therapy, or we had questions and we didn't want to like bother our therapist at random times. And he also has some DBT workbooks and stuff to go along with this. He is a godsend for us. Um, but that's about everything that we have to talk on this subject now. We hope going forward that not only things will make more sense with our channel and with our behavior as far as having DID, but also while we might manifest sometimes extreme reactions to content. I know that some people are entertained by the anger, but just know that sometimes when we're reacting so angry, that's not intentional. It just comes out, and then we, roll it back and then talk in a more logical way. And for us, if we do feel too extreme of an emotion too quickly, we will dissociate. And that's why you'll notice long pauses, or we might get confused about what's going on, or where we were at in our conversation. But we will do our best to maintain our zen, use some of the stuff that we've learned as far as grounding techniques and that sort of thing. And hope you continue to join us on this long, strange journey through our mind. And we will see you in the next video. Bye.